They say that time is a thief, that it steals our memories bit by bit until all that's left are blurry outlines and faded feelings. And for most days, I suppose that's true. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast last Tuesday or what the weather was like on my 30th birthday. Those days are like watercolors left out in the rain, their details bled into a wash of sameness. But some days are different. Some days are captured, not on film, but in the heart, and they remain as clear and vibrant as the moment they were lived. For me, that day is a Saturday in late August, a lifetime ago. A day spun from golden sunlight and the sweet scent of possibility. The day I met Thomas. I have a photograph of myself from that summer. It's sepia-toned now, the corners soft and worn from 1,000 gentle touches. There I am, just 22, with my chestnut hair in that bob I thought was so sophisticated. My eyes, they're looking just slightly off camera, as if I'm searching for something just beyond the frame. There's a quiet hope in them, I see it now, a hope I didn't even know I was carrying. I was wearing my favorite sundress, a simple thing with muted blue and cream flowers, cinched at the waist, and on my feet, my trusty white keds, already scuffed with the dust of a summer well spent. I look like a girl on the cusp of everything, and nothing at all. The Oakwood Community Fair was the heart of our summer. It wasn't a grand affair, not like the ones you see in the cities. It was ours. It bloomed for one weekend a year in Millersfield, a patchwork quilt of striped tents, hand-painted signs, and the collective joy of a town taking a deep, happy breath. The air itself was a symphony of smells. You'd get this sharp, sweet tang of Mrs. Gable's prize-winning lemon meringue pies, the buttery perfume of popcorn from the popping machine that chugged along like a little steam engine, and underneath it all, the earthy scent of hay bales and trampled grass. The sounds were a cheerful cacophony, the tinny, looping music of the carousel, the delighted shrieks of children on the Ferris wheel, the low hum of 1,000 conversations, all woven together by the laughter that seemed to catch on the breeze and drift across the fields. I went alone that year. My friends were all pairing off, finding their futures in the familiar faces they'd known since grade school. I was happy for them, truly, but a part of me felt adrift. I was a librarian's assistant at the town library, a quiet girl who lived more in the pages of books than in the sunlit world outside. I loved the order of the Dewey Decimal System, the hushed reverence of the reading room. But that day, I felt a gentle pull, a yearning for something less cataloged, something unexpected. So I went to the fair, not for the candied apples or the ring toss, but for my own private treasure hunt. Tucked away behind the grandstand, far from the main thoroughfare, was Eleanor Vance's bookstall. It wasn't much more than a few rickety trestle tables under a sagging canvas awning, but to me, it was the most magical place in Oakwood. Eleanor was a town institution, a woman with silver hair pinned in a neat bun and the kindest, wisest eyes you've ever seen. Her spectacles hung from a chain around her neck, and she always wore a floral apron over her dress, dusted with the faint papery scent of her wares. She didn't just sell books, she curated memories. Each volume on her tables had lived a life before it got there, its pages softened by other hands, its spine creased by other readers. She called it the Island of Misfit Stories, and I loved it. I spent the first hour of my day there, lost in that wonderful, musty quiet. The noise of the fair was a distant roar, like the ocean heard from inside a shell. I ran my fingers over the faded gold lettering on leather-bound classics and smiled at the charmingly dated illustrations in old children's books. I was on a particular quest that afternoon. My mother's copy of Pride and Prejudice had finally given up the ghost, its spine splitting after decades of devoted reading. I was determined to find a replacement, a vintage one with the right feel, the right weight in my hands. The sun was high in the sky, casting dappled shadows through the canvas awning. I was at the last table, the one piled highest with paperbacks in a delightful, chaotic jumble. My head was down, my focus absolute. I was a literary archaeologist, carefully sifting through layers of forgotten westerns and dusty gardening manuals. My fingers brushed against a familiar blue spine. It was a Penguin Classic edition, the cover beautifully worn, the corners rounded with affection. My heart gave a little flutter. There it was. I reached for it, my fingers anticipating the feel of the familiar pages. And in that exact same moment, the world tilted. Not literally, of course, but it felt that way. There was a sudden, gentle jolt, a solid presence where a moment before there had been only air. I had, in my single-minded pursuit of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, walked straight into someone. The impact was soft, but the result was spectacular. The leaning tower of paperbacks I'd been next to wavered for a breathless second before surrendering to gravity. Books cascaded to the ground, a waterfall of paper and words. They landed with a series of soft, fluttering thuds, scattering around our feet like a flock of startled birds. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry," a voice said, a voice that was warm and deep and immediately apologetic. No, it was my fault," I stammered, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I wasn't looking where I was going at all." We both bent down at the same time, a synchronous motion of mutual regret. And there, lying amongst a sea of scattered stories, was the little blue copy of Pride and Prejudice. Inevitably, instinctively, our hands reached for it at the exact same time. My fingers, small and pale, brushed against his. His hand was warm and strong. The touch sent a little jolt, like static electricity on a dry day, straight up my arm. Our eyes met over the worn cover of Jane Austen's masterpiece. And the world stopped. I know how that sounds. It sounds like something I've read in one of the very books that now lay at our feet. A cliché, a trope. But I can tell you, with the unwavering certainty of a woman who has lived 86 years, it was utterly, breathtakingly true. The noise of the fair, the music, the laughter, the shouting, it all just dissolved. It became a distant hum, a vibration I could feel in the soles of my kids, but could no longer hear. All that existed was the space between us, charged with a silence that was more profound than any sound. He had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. They were a startlingly clear blue, the color of the summer sky just after a rainstorm. And when he looked at me, really looked at me, they crinkled at the corners. It wasn't just a smile. It was an expression that seemed to emanate from his very soul. His dark brown hair was neatly combed, and a stray lock had fallen across his forehead in the commotion. He was wearing a simple, light-colored collared shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and tailored trousers. There was nothing overtly flashy about him, and yet he was the most handsome man I had ever seen. I have no idea how long we knelt there, our hands hovering over the same book, our gazes locked. It could have been a second. It could have been a lifetime. It felt like both. In his eyes, I saw not a stranger, but a reflection of something I recognized in myself, a quiet curiosity, a hint of an old soul. It was a silent, profound understanding that passed between us, a conversation without a single word. He was the one to break the spell. He slowly retracted his hand, a genuine, charming smile spreading across his face. "A woman of excellent taste," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. I finally found my own voice, though it came out a little breathless. "I could say the same for you." He picked up the book and handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine again, a little more deliberately this time. "Please," he said, "you saw it first." "We saw it at the same time," I countered, a smile finally reaching my lips. "And you're the one who saved it from being trampled." From behind the table, Eleanor Vance cleared her throat. We both looked up, startled, as if remembering where we were. She was watching us with that benevolent, knowing smile of hers, her silver head tilted to one side. She had seen the whole thing, the collision, the cascade of books, the silent, charged moment that followed. Her eyes twinkled, as if she were the keeper of all the love stories in the world, and had just witnessed the start of a brand new chapter. "There's no need to argue, children," she said, her voice like dry, rustling leaves. "I have another copy of that one in a box under the table. A little more weathered, but the story's just the same." The young man, I didn't even know his name yet, grinned at her. "Eleanor, you're a miracle worker." He turned back to me. "Well, it seems fate has intervened. I'm Thomas, by the way." "Lena," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Lena," he repeated, and the way he said my name, it sounded like the most beautiful word in the English language. "It's a pleasure to meet you, even under such literary circumstances." We spent the next 10 minutes on our hands and knees, gathering the fallen books. It was clumsy and comical, our heads occasionally bumping, our apologies tumbling over each other. But with every book we stacked, the initial awkwardness melted away, replaced by an easy, comfortable rhythm. We talked as we worked.
He told me he was an apprentice to his uncle, an architect over in the next town. He loved the idea of creating spaces for people to live their lives in, of building homes that would hold generations of stories. I told him I worked at the library, surrounded by stories that had already been written. "So you keep the old stories safe, and I try to build places for new ones," he said, looking at me with that warm, direct gaze. "We're in the same business, really." I had never thought of it that way. In that moment, he made my quiet, unassuming job sound like the most important work in the world. When the last book was back on the table, a silence fell between us. The fair, with all its noise and life, was still going on around us. I felt a sudden panic that this was it, that he would say, "Well, it was nice to meet you," and walk away. And this perfect, impossible moment would become just a strange, sweet memory. But he didn't. He hesitated for a second, then asked, "I was just about to get a lemonade. The sun's getting hot. Would you like to join me, Lena?" My heart did a little leap. "I'd love that," I said, trying to sound casual, as if handsome strangers asked me for lemonade every day. We paid a flustered Eleanor for identical copies of Pride and Prejudice, and she patted my hand as she gave me my change. "You take care, dear," she said, and her knowing smile told me she wasn't just talking about the book. Walking away from the bookstall with Thomas felt like stepping out of a quiet black and white film into a world of dazzling technicolor. The sounds of the fair rushed back in, but they were no longer a cacophony. With him beside me, they became the soundtrack to our afternoon. He bought us 2 tall, sweating glasses of lemonade from a checkered cloth stand, and the sweet, tart liquid was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. We found a hay bale to sit on, near the edge of the animal pens. It was a ridiculous place to have a conversation, with the bleating of prize-winning sheep and the proud crowing of a rooster as our backdrop, but it felt right. It felt real. The conversation flowed as easily as a river. It wasn't the stilted, polite small talk I was used to. We dove right into the deep end. We talked about our favorite books, of course. His was The Grapes of Wrath, and the passion with which he spoke about its themes of dignity and perseverance told me more about him than 100 questions ever could. We talked about our families, our hopes, our quiet, secret fears. He confessed he was terrified of not living up to his uncle's expectations. I confessed that I sometimes worried I would get so lost in the pages of books that I'd forget to live a story of my own. He listened. I mean, he truly listened. When I spoke, his blue eyes were fixed on me, and I could see him taking in my words, considering them. He made me feel like the most fascinating person at that entire fair. He had a way of laughing, a full, genuine sound that started deep in his chest, and I found myself saying things I thought were witty just to hear it. Time seemed to bend and warp around us. An hour felt like 5 minutes. We left the hay bales and started to walk, with no destination in mind, our path dictated only by the flow of the crowd and the rhythm of our conversation. He pointed out the architectural flaws in the rickety tilt-a-whirl structure with a professional's eye, making me laugh. I told him the history of the Oakwood community, pointing out the descendants of the founding families as they walked by, a trivia I'd picked up at the library. He stopped in front of the pie stand, his eyes lighting up. "My mother makes the best apple pie in 3 counties, he declared. "But she's not here, so this will have to be our official taste test." He bought a huge slice of apple pie, still warm from the oven, and a single fork. We stood there, under the shade of a large oak tree, and shared it. He'd take a bite, then hand the plate and fork to me. There was an intimacy in the simple act, a casual sharing that felt like we'd done it 100 times before. The crust was flaky, the apples perfectly spiced with cinnamon, and the memory of sharing that slice of pie with him is more vivid to me now than the taste of any gourmet meal I've had since. It tasted of sunshine and cinnamon, and the beginning of everything. As the afternoon began to wane, the light softened, turning the dusty air into a golden haze. The long shadows of the tents stretched across the fairgrounds like pointing fingers. We found ourselves drawn towards the Ferris wheel, which stood like a slow-turning metal skeleton against the deepening blue sky. "Have you been on it?" Thomas asked, his voice soft. I shook my head. "I'm a little afraid of heights." He looked at me, and his smile was gentle, understanding. "I'll be right there," he said simply. "I promise I won't let you fall." And I believed him. I, Lena, the quiet girl who always played it safe, who preferred the solid ground beneath her feet, found myself nodding. We got in line, and when it was our turn, the operator latched us into the small swinging carriage. The first lurch of the machine sent a thrill of fear through me, and I instinctively grabbed onto the safety bar. Thomas didn't laugh or tease me. He simply laid his hand over mine on the bar. His touch was warm, steadying. "Just look out, not down."
As we rose higher and higher, the sounds of the fair began to fade again, replaced by the creak and groan of the machinery and the whisper of the wind. We rose above the tents, above the trees, and the whole of Oakwood spread out below us like a living map. I could see the church steeple, the glint of the river, the patchwork of fields stretching out to the horizon. It was beautiful. At the very top, the wheel paused, as it always did. leaving us suspended between the sky and the earth. The world was silent. The setting sun had painted the western clouds in strokes of orange and pink and violet. The chaos of the fair below looked so small, so orderly from up here. "It's funny," Thomas said, his voice a low murmur beside me. "From here you can see how everything connects. The roads, the houses, the fields. It all fits together." I looked at him then, at his profile outlined against the spectacular sunset. The golden light caught in his dark hair and illuminated the kindness in his face. He wasn't looking at the view anymore. He was looking at me. And in that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling of rightness so profound it almost made me dizzy. It was a feeling of coming home to a place I hadn't even known I was searching for. My fear of heights was gone, replaced by a feeling that I could float here forever, as long as he was beside me. The wheel began its slow descent, bringing us back down to earth, back to the music and the laughter. But something had shifted. The world we returned to felt different, brighter, more full of promise than the one we had left just 10 minutes before. As we walked away from the ride, our hands were still clasped together. Neither of us had made a conscious decision to hold hands. It had just happened. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. The fair was beginning to wind down. Families were gathering their tired, sticky children. The vendors were starting to pack up their wares. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of evening dew and wood smoke from a distant bonfire. We walked in a comfortable silence for a while, just soaking in the last moments of the day. We found an empty bench on the edge of the fairgrounds, overlooking a meadow that sloped down to the creek. The last fiery sliver of sun was disappearing behind the hills, and the first stars were beginning to prick the velvety twilight sky. The cheerful cacophony of the fair had softened to a gentle, pulsing rhythm, the heartbeat of a day well spent. We sat there, our shoulders barely touching, our entwined hands resting on the bench between us. The Pride and Prejudice paperbacks we had bought hours ago sat on our other sides, silent witnesses to our unfolding story. I traced the pattern on my floral dress with my free hand, my mind a whirl of emotions I couldn't quite name. Thomas was quiet, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. I watched him, memorizing the line of his jaw, the way the fading light caught the blue of his eyes. I thought about the day, about the impossible series of events that had led me to this bench next to this man, the whim to go to the fair alone, the search for a specific book, the turn, the bump, the fall, the simultaneous reach. Any single one of those things could have happened differently, a few seconds earlier, a few seconds later, and our paths might never have crossed. It was serendipity. It was magic. He turned to me then, his expression serious, but his eyes still held that gentle crinkle. "I have to confess something, Lena," he said, his voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear him over the chirping of the crickets. My heart gave a little nervous thump. "What is it?" "I wasn't looking for a book today," he said. "My uncle sent me to the fair to take some measurements of the old grandstand. He thinks it needs reinforcing. I was done hours ago. I was just walking around. I was about to leave when I saw Eleanor's bookstall." He paused, taking a breath. "And then I saw you. You were so completely lost in your search. You had this look of concentration and wonder on your face. I just stopped. I couldn't walk away. I stood there for 5 minutes just watching you, trying to work up the courage to say hello." He let out a small, self-deprecating laugh. "And then you, in your infinite grace, solved the problem for me by walking straight into me." I stared at him, my mind reeling. He had seen me. Before the bump, before the book. The collision hadn't been an accident that started something. It had been the universe's clumsy, wonderful way of finishing something that had already begun in his heart. A profound warmth spread through my chest, a feeling so deep and powerful it took my breath away. It was a feeling of being seen, truly and completely seen. All the quiet longings of my heart, the vague sense of waiting for something I couldn't define, it all coalesced in that single stunning moment. The noise, the lights, the entire world fell away one last time. There was only the gathering dark, the scent of summer grass, and the face of the man sitting next to me.
The man who dreamed of building homes for stories, who loved John Steinbeck, who shared his apple pie, and who wasn't afraid to hold my hand on a Ferris wheel. The man who saw me in a crowd and decided to stay. And in the quiet clarity of that moment, I knew. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a hope or a wish. It was a fact, as solid and real as the wooden bench beneath me. This was it. This was the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. This was the other half of my soul, the missing chapter in my story. This was my forever. The realization didn't strike me like a bolt of lightning. It settled over me, as gently and completely as the twilight settling over the fields. It was a quiet, unequivocal knowing that filled every empty space inside me. I must have had a strange expression on my face, because he looked at me with a hint of concern. "Lena, are you all right?" I turned to him, and for the first time that day, I let him see everything I was feeling. All the wonder, all the hope, all the breathtaking certainty. "Thomas," I said, and my voice was steady and clear. "I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life." The relief that washed over his face was a beautiful thing to see. He brought my hand up to his lips and kissed my knuckles, a gesture so tender and old-fashioned it made my heart ache with happiness. "Me too, Lena," he whispered against my skin. "Me too." We left the fairgrounds not long after that, walking hand in hand through the moonlit streets of Oakwood. He walked me all the way to my front porch. Under the soft yellow glow of the porch light, he finally let go of my hand, and for a panicked moment, I felt the loss of his touch. But then he smiled that smile, the one that reached all the way to his kind blue eyes. "I'll call you tomorrow?" he asked, though it sounded more like a statement, a promise. "Yes," I said, "please." He didn't kiss me that night. He just looked at me for a long moment, his gaze full of all the things we hadn't yet said, all the days we hadn't yet shared. And then he turned and walked down the path, his silhouette disappearing into the summer night. I stood on that porch for a long time, pressing the worn copy of Pride and Prejudice to my chest. It was no longer just a book. It was a relic, a sacred object, the catalyst for my entire future.